The longer you stay alive, the longer you can enjoy Boost Mobile's unlimited plan with a price that never goes up. So here are some tips. Do not parallel park on a cliff if you want to enjoy an unlimited plan with a price that never goes up. Do not mistake a wasp nest for a piñata if you want to enjoy an unlimited plan with a price that never goes up. Do not microwave a hard-boiled egg if you want to enjoy an unlimited plan with the price that never goes up. Stay alive and enjoy unlimited wireless for $25 a month forever with Boost Mobile. After 30 gigs, customers may experience lower speeds. Customers will pay $25 a month as long as they remain active on the Boost Mobile Unlimited plan.
Hey, this is Elise Hugh from TED Talks Daily, and I'd love to tell you about Whole Foods Market. You know what I love about January? It's that fresh start energy we all feel. And this year, I'm actually going to try and keep my goals realistic, which means I need places that make healthy choices easy and affordable. That's why I've been spending more time at my local Whole Foods Market. The thing is, Whole Foods Market makes it possible to stick with those New Year intentions without meal prepping for hours or breaking the bank. Shop all things wellness at Whole Foods Market.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Welcome to Aran Island This, a podcast series where we talk to Irish people from different walks of life as they reflect on their own journeys. Join me, Rossa McDermott, as we explore the many aspects of Irishness and what it means to each of our guests through life's ups and downs. Kevin Killen, welcome to Aran Island This.
Lovely to be here. Thank you very much for the invite.
And the first trick question we have is, have you been there?
I have not yet, but I do plan to go in the next couple of years. Obviously, I come from Dublin. Every time I come to Dublin, it's always like family, yeah. Either with my family or my extended family here. So, yeah.
And do you come back often?
I have been back almost every year since I first went to the States. Almost, yeah. And in the last few years, I've been back a lot because my mom just turned 100, as I said, last year. So, shout out to Mom out in Care Choice in Malahide Road. And unfortunately, last year, one of my brothers passed unexpectedly. So so there was a combination of birthday and that. So yeah,
that's one thing when you live abroad, your big fear is being drawn back for those kind of reasons. They're good when you're back.
Yeah.
But always choose up days that some of us don't have when you work in the States, 5 days, holidays a year.
Yeah. It was one of the things I first noticed when I was there. It was like, and I went there in the mid-'80s. So at the time, Aer Lingus would fly to Shannon first and you do that jump off from Shannon to New York or Boston or wherever you were heading to. And at the same time, like a phone call was very expensive. And you didn't think of it at the time. And my mom was like, the day I left, she made I'm one of 8 kids, right? So all of them had to come to the airport to say goodbye to me. And my mom said, say goodbye to your brother because you're not going to see him again. Historically, that emigrant story of like, oh, he's gone. He's not coming back. I came back a lot,
Now, if you haven't been to Aran Islands, do you have a very favourite place here?
I love out the west, Connemara National Park, Doolin, County Clare. Down south, I love Kinsale, Ringakerry. Even in Dublin, I love up by Howth Head, down Dollymount Strand. My sister lives out in Portmarnock. I love going walking on the beach there. And I was just up in Carlingford, and that area is beautiful. So, lots of places to love in Ireland.
On good days.
Well, you don't come to Ireland for the weather.
No, you don't. I mean, I've been to Ireland a few times and they've all been good days.
Yeah, well, then you're a blessed man.
In case the bubbles burst.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
How do you describe yourself, Kevin, your passport, immigration?
I describe myself probably now as a dual citizen, although, because I have both passports. But I really do consider myself Irish, first and foremost. I mean, you can't take the Irish out of the Irish person. It's so much part of who you are. And, I've leaned into that over the years. Part of my training, part of my taste in music, folk music, Irish music, trad music, from pop to rock, anything like that. There's always a flavour of Irishness to it that I always try and kind of embed into the project.
And do you feel more Irish when you're there, in a way?
I feel like a New Yorker. I'm very comfortable in that city. As I said, when I moved there in the 80s, it had a reputation of being violent,
Yeah.
And honestly, in all the time I've been there, I've never seen one act of violence. Now, either I'm blind or I've been fortunate, but it's a friendly city, more friendly than its reputation suggests.
High energy, isn't it?
Yeah, but if you you put it contextually into the fact that you have 8 million people living on a small plot of land. I mean, almost twice the population of Ireland in a very condensed space. Yeah, people are busy and they're moving around, but people are very friendly that you can stop and ask for directions. People are always willing to help, but then they're very succinct and direct, and then they move on. So I do like the city a lot. And I think the one thing that I've learned there, living there, is I like the cosmopolitan aspect of it, because when I left Ireland in the mid-'80s, Ireland was not that cosmopolitan. It was very, and now it is, which I think is a wonderful thing. To me, that's like the beauty of life, is meeting different people and discussing what they've gone through and what their journey was and relating your own journey. And there's a lot of similarity in people's journeys as people move across the globe. And I just think that's something I'm drawn to, and I think the thing that you break bread with people, you share a meal, love of music, love of life, love of humor, love of culture, you realize people are the same the worldwide. And to me, that's like the thing that I've learned mostly from leaving Ireland. So
what you studying, Trudy?
I was doing a science degree. I actually originally wanted to do an engineering degree. Yeah. And when I did my Leaving Cert in 78, I believe 78 was the first year, or 77 was the first year, I was on the younger side. And I did okay, but I didn't get enough points. So then my older brother, who is actually an engineer, my brother Dermot, he said, why don't you just go back and repeat it? So I went into the Institute of Higher Education there in Marion Square. And I went and I did it. The next year I got the required number of points, but given the number of applicants, they increased the threshold. So I ended up getting my second choice, which was science. And I liked science as a student. I was always interested in the sciences. So I went in the first year, and it's interesting when you look back at certain things that happen in your life, the perspective that you...
Well, the plans you had changed.
Yeah, and I was thinking at the
John
time...
Lennon phrases.
Yeah.
Life moves on while you're planning somebody else.
Yeah.
Right.
And the first month there, I went into a chemistry, I think it was a chemistry lecture, and I was the dean of the chemistry lab, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but we had science students, there were pre-med students, and I think there was one other like strain of students in there, and he said it was about 200 kids, and he goes, I don't really care if you show up. Like, I don't really care. What we care about at the end of the year is your grade. And of course, what he was really saying was, you're an adult. We're not going to parent you,
Yeah.
But I took it the other way. I took it like, what do you mean you don't care? Yeah. I was really kind of put out, and I was like, maybe this is not the place for me. But I stayed that first year, passed my exams. In my second year, I went back and I was beginning to have doubts like whether science was a career for me. And then I thought about summer jobs, between second and third year. Yeah. And I thought, I'd seen a documentary about the making of an XTC record. And I thought, that looks really interesting.
Plans for now,
yeah, and it was all the things that I was interested in. Yeah. I had a drum set, I played with some friends. Okay. I had no aspirations to be...
But you had a musical environment.
Yeah, I had a musical environment, and music always fascinated me. And my older brothers were the ones who always turned me on to music. And, I grew up in the 70s, so I had Zeppelin, Beatles. My eldest brother was into Motown and Stax. My sisters were into ABBA, all the glam pop stuff from the UK, the Chin and Chapman stuff and Mickey Most, like all those records that were made in a very specific way. And I just thought, like maybe that was it. So I literally just pulled out the yellow pages and looked up recording studios in Dublin, and there were 8 of them. Well, and I went around to every one of them in late March, and I just said, hey, I'm looking for a summer job.
Doing anything.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought, well, is there an opening? I just needed to make some money, you know what I mean? And I wanted to keep myself busy. And the previous year I'd been in Holland working in a canning factory, and I didn't want to do that again. Please not. I went off carrots and aubergines very quickly after that experience. Yeah. So I got in there, and Pat Murphy, who was the studio manager at the time, said, come back in a week's time for like an interview. And my dad at the time said, okay, like you're going in for your interview, make sure you like shave and, like do all the things you should do and present your best possible self. And so my dad loaned me this jacket. It was like a white outerwear jacket, but it was cut at the waist. It was only just 2 side pockets, and it was very stylish, And I went into the interview, and Pat goes, okay, where do you want this job? Terrible job, shite job, terrible pay, terrible hours. And he's really trying to dissuade me. And he goes, where'd you get that jacket? I said, that's my dad's jacket. Oh, your dad has good taste. All right, you're hired.
Cheers.
And that was it. I got hired. And the first session I did, April 18th, I went in, and it was Philip Begley was the engineer, fantastic engineer. Bill Whelan was the producer, and Michael Hanley was the artist. And they were doing overdubs. So they'd already recorded the basic tracks with a bunch of, Irish players. And he was doing guitar overdubs, and I think we had like whistle, and then he did a couple of vocals. And literally like Philip came in and said, okay, this is a microphone. This is a cable. This end goes in here. That goes into the wall. I mean, it would literally like, And then that first week he said to me, okay, and they knew my background coming from Trinity, and they were like, okay, if you're interested, we'll show you how the whole studio works. But if you want to know the technical stuff, all the manuals are in the back. Go read them and come back to us with questions. So every day I would have, what does this mean? Tell me what this means. How does that relate to this? So my curiosity and I've got a pretty logical mind. So problem solving has always been something I enjoy doing. And kind of making records is kind of like problem solving, And I fell into it quite easily. Obviously, I didn't know how to make a record at that moment in time.
Yeah.
But within 6 months, I'd witnessed enough where I was able to bring in my friend's band late one night. And we recorded something. And I think I found the cassette of it a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And it's really bad sounding. But
At the time,
I managed to record bass, guitar, drums, and vocals through the console, from the studio recording space through the console, onto the tape machine and back again, and made a rough mix. And the next day, Philip, I'd stayed up all night. I think I got an hour's sleep. When you're 19, that's fine, right? You live on adrenaline. So we were doing a session with Brush Shields. And I'd done a number of sessions with Philip and Brush. So at the end of the session, they knew I was tired. And they said, well, let's hear what you did. So I played it. And they were very gracious. They were kind of like, Philip says, well, it's a start. And I loved it because he goes, okay, here's the thing. You have to work on sound. You have to work on timing. You have to work on helping with the arrangement. That's part of the job that you do. And you might not get paid for it, but you're building your skill set when you do that. Like, it's a collaborative process. So don't be afraid to speak up.
It's great that they were encouraging.
It was such a fantastic
Because my memory
approach.
of Ireland of those days, it wasn't necessarily that was the case everywhere you went.
Well, it certainly wasn't in school. I had some great teachers in school, of course, like everybody does. But my career guidance teacher, yet again, in hindsight, I'm not sure if he was just trying to give me a kick up the backside, or my brother Aidan and my brother Terry were 2 years and 1 year ahead of me, respectively, in the school. So when I got there, their reputation preceded me. So, and they're both very bright. But in hindsight, the career guidance teacher, when I went for career guidance, he said to me, he goes, yeah, Killen, Kevin, yeah. Aidan, Terry, yeah. He goes, yeah, you're not going to amount to anything. That's what he said to me. And now I think back and I'm thinking maybe he was just throwing down the glove and saying,
But it's in common with people who are successful in inverted commas. That in some way is an unintended motivation, whether it was intentional or not.
Yeah. Subliminally, it was there. Yeah, it was there. Yeah.
It grates on your mind.
Yeah, it's like, I'll show you. You know what I mean? And
Did you ever close the circle and go back and see him?
No, I've never seen him. And I don't even remember his name. And it's funny, I was just out with my friend Tom last night. We went to school together and we couldn't remember his name. He was a lovely man, but who knows, how many other kids he said the same thing to. And maybe he was right. Maybe it was the motivation I needed.
But so that start in Lombard was...
Yeah, Lombard was my thing.
The rest is history, is that what
Well, it was interesting because then I had also, because I'd gone around to all the studios, I'd gone down and interviewed at Windmill Lane, and Brian Masterson had interviewed me, and they had just hired a couple of people, so they didn't have an opening. But I was up at Lombard, and, there was a lot of clients that went between the two studios. And we had a jingle writer, this guy, Jerry, and I'm just blanking on his last name, but he started to hire me to do his basically demonstration tapes for pitches for ads. And so I'd done a number of them. And so we basically had a little show reel of the work I had done. And I was probably there about a year and a half at this point. So I was getting better. And I was a pretty decent engineer, like for somebody who was still a novice. I could get good sounds. And he went down to Windmill after working with me in the morning time, and he did a full session with Brian. And at the end of that day, he asked Brian, could he transfer something that he'd done with me that morning? Yeah. And as Brian was listening, he said, oh, who did this? And Jerry said, oh, it's that young engineer, Kevin. And Brian said, well, what's he like? And Jerry, I think, said, oh, he's very good. He can clearly record. No, Brian said, no, what's his character like in the street? Like, what's he like around people? Jerry, I think, said, he's calm. He's calm. He's nice to be around. He's empathetic. He gets the whole vibe of the studio. So Brian called me a couple of days later and invited me down for an interview. And I think Windmill were beginning to expand. So I got hired by Windmill. And that was a very fortuitous break because I grew up in Artane. Yeah. On the street I grew up in, it was Lawrence. The same street as Larry Mullen, and our families knew each other. And when Larry heard I was working at Windmill, he asked the studio manager.
He did know of you.
Yeah, he know. Yeah. Well, I'm a couple of years older than Larry, but I knew I'm roughly the same age as his sister Cecilia. Yeah. So he asked either the studio manager or the other band members, hey, can we have my neighbor basically come in? And so getting that break was a big one because the person, ironically, like just closing the circle, that XTC documentary about making a record, Steve Lillywhite was the producer.
Oh, my God.
And Hugh Padgham was the engineer.
God.
So Steve, the very first record I did with U2 as an assistant engineer at Windmill was with Steve. And he was fantastic. He was, at the time, he seemed like so much more mature than the band, but he was 24 years of age.
Yeah.
And I was 20, you know what I mean? And that just seemed like a huge leap.
And were you aware of you'd found your vocation? Like you weren't you knew you were there.
The first day I walked into the studio, because when you walked into Lombard and you went up and it was like 2 flights of stairs. You came through the little kind of tiny little kitchen area, and then you walked into the control room on the left, and then you had to walk up a step on the platform where the console was. And that's where all the equipment was, all the tape machines were there. And I remember just literally making that stand up and looking at the Helios console. And I thought, oh yeah, I totally knew that this was going to be my life. And my parents were like, what? Because I went from being a college student, coming home at whatever, 5 o'clock in the evening time, to coming up at 5 in the morning. And they're looking at me going, and this is what you chose to do? Yeah. And I was like, no, I totally knew.
Most people would be scared looking at those consoles. I mean, it's obviously your mind is very logical, sequential.
Yeah.
All that is...
Yeah, it made sense.
Yeah.
And even though I knew nothing about the process, I mean, I'd read a little bit about it, but I didn't really understand it. And then you start to experience it, and then you start to put you connect the dots, and then you just go from there. So, yeah, and I loved it. I mean, every day was just, I didn't always love the music that you record, because you can't like everything you work on. And as an assistant engineer, you don't get to choose what the project is, but you always learn something every day. And even today, 46 years in, there's always something to learn, because the technology changes. How people listen to music changes. So everything, there's always something to learn.
But you start seeing your name appearing in credits and recognition and...
Yeah, no, that's always nice.
Yes.
That's when people physically made records, and you look at the back of an album cover and you see your name, even if it's assistant engineer. It's like, and everybody lived and died by those credits. So you fought to get your credit.
And that's how we all learned who
was doing what. Yeah. I mean, I remember in the 70s looking at the very first record I ever bought was David Bowie, Ziggy Stardust, and looking at who's the engineer, who's the producer, who are all the musicians, who are these people, what is this studio? So yeah, I was always curious about those kind of things, but I didn't, I was 12, but I didn't really tie it together until I got a little bit older. So,
and the choice to go to the States was just sheer professional.
The choice to go to the US was based on the idea that I spent another 4 years at Wimble Lane, and at the end of
things were happening here.
Yeah, things were happening. Wimble had opened a second studio.
It seemed like throwing the face of good luck to move on and try it in.
Well, I'd kind of finished my apprenticeship.
That's it.
And that was really it. And Bryan was like, look, you always have a job here, but we need to create space for the next assistant engineer.
Yeah.
So you need to go freelance. And it was, and we all knew it was the time. It was myself, it was Kevin Maloney, it was Pierce Dunn. We were all we had learned as much as we could learn. They gave me enough rein, and all of us enough rein to do, to be in the first engineer chair. So I'd done a number of projects already as an engineer. And so the next step was to kind of go freelance. And then the question is, well, how do you be freelance in Dublin? What's that going to look like? And do I go to London? And the mid-'80s, wasn't exactly the greatest environment for Irish people.
No, I was there. It wasn't
it wasn't the greatest. And I have lots of great English friends, but what was going on there politically and what was between the two countries.
It was uncomfortable.
It was very uncomfortable, yeah. The other choice was Paris.
Yeah.
But my French was lousy. Language, not my skill set. So then I thought, maybe the States. And ironically, the last record I did in Wimble was U2's Unforgettable Fire. Mm. So that was with Brian Eno, Daniel Lanois. The band brought in a remote recording system from the US. So on the war tour that they did around the US, that portion, that they did an outdoor show in Boulder, Colorado at Red Rocks. And that was
the live.
That's the live record, right? But literally, it was recorded remotely, and the studio owner, his name is Randy Israni. He's a California man, but he lived in New York at the time. He literally had a whole studio in flight cases. And he would put it either on a container or in a cargo plane.
Ship it out.
Ship it over. So tape machines, consoles, everything, like microphone stands, cables. I mean, big, like a lot of gear. And when the band were getting ready to go in and think about doing the Unforgettable Fire, they ended up in Slane Castle as rehearsing space. And they were like, yeah, what about that guy who had that studio? And so they invited him over with all his gear, and they decided to record the basic tracks for Unforgettable Fire
in Slane.
Yeah. Which was not, it wasn't built to
be. And it's very bizarre.
Yeah. And at the time, even Henry Martin Charles would probably say...
It was in my living room.
Well, it wasn't fit for purpose, you know what I mean? Like the power was less than ideal.
Yeah.
But we made it work, and it was a great experience.
What's trick there? The room, the sound, or... Because technically you couldn't do much tweaking.
Yeah, I mean, we were recording to tape.
Yeah.
And we had these John Stevens machines that were from California. They about a third the height of a regular Studer machine. And they were roughly as deep as you needed to be to fit a 2-inch reel of tape on there. And on the front, there were these tiny VU meters, right? And the calibration was kind of funky. Really good sounding, but it had some quirks to it. It really needed to see, consistent power at a certain voltage. And So that needs to be regulated. And then the other thing is you couldn't, like with other tape machines, you can take a reel of tape that's basically gone end out and you can turn it over and put it back on and erase everything. But on those machines, the erase head wasn't strong enough. It was fine if it was going from left to right, but if you take the pack and put it on the other side, So one of the songs I think we were recording Sort of Homecoming, and Dan was like, just turn the reel over. And I was like, we're not supposed to. He goes, just turn it over. So we turned it over. And of course, Murphy's Law, the next take was the one. And in fact, as we hit play, you could hear the reverse of the previous take, which hadn't been fully erased. It was partially erased. And then the overlay was the new track. So that track has a little bit of a kind of a little juju on it.
Yeah. And you knew you had something special.
Yeah, we knew there was something special going on up there. And I'd seen the band. I saw them when they played in the Dandelion Market.
Yeah.
I saw them when they played at Trinity because they used to come and do.
I saw them Dandelion Market.
Yeah, and they played lunchtime shows at the Pavilion, at like a lunchtime gig, and Bono up and down the steps. Yeah.
I'm sure if you ask now, there's millions of people there that day.
Nah, there was a couple of hundred students.
Like I had around people with the Roxy when they played there in Boston. It grows every year.
Yeah, it grows exponentially. Yeah.
And where does Irishness fit into your life, Kevin? Is it something dealing with these musicians like you two? Does it enhance it? Does it make you proud?
Oh, no, I'm totally proud to be Irish, yeah. And I think it actually has helped my career because when I first went to the States, as they say, you have an accent. So, like, people perk up and they go, oh, where are you from? And I always say, I'm not the one who has the accent. You have the accent. You know what I mean? Like, my accent is normal to me.
Yeah.
Now my siblings say I have an American accent because I've been there for so many years.
Yeah.
But
you do.
Yeah, no, it's going to modify. There's no.
You're not in New York, you're not.
I think the thing is when you slow the Irish accent down, it becomes broader and it does sound more mid-Atlantic. So yeah, I love being Irish. I fully identify with the wit and the humor and the kind of just the fun that people have here, and the kind of just devil may care attitude. But also, when I left, it was Ireland was really beginning to go through the transition from, in my mind, like a third world country into like the 21st century. The Irish Free State was only 60 odd years old. It only been a member of the European community by 12 years, 13 years in the mid 80s. And you started to see like what that investment was beginning to kind of foment.
And ironically, you would have seen it close. Music made a huge difference.
Oh, music was huge.
I remember landing in Las Vegas and U2 came on, 91. What the?
Yeah.
And that really kind of put us on the map.
Yeah. And when I left Wimble, U2 were going on tour with the Unforgettable Fire. Yeah. So I actually went on the road with them in Europe. We did the Netherlands, we did Denmark, we did France, we did the UK. And I doubled up doing both kind of backline stuff for Adam, but then I also was recording shows. And some of those shows ended up being that Wide Awake in America.
Yeah, Wide Awake,
Bad. Yeah. And then I went to the US in late 84, and I was just like, okay, I got to know Randy, who owned F&L Music, which was the name of his remote recording company. And I thought, well, let me just go see what I can do. And I just went there, and it was really more exploration because, I didn't have an offer of a job, and you couldn't get an offer of a job until you had a visa. So you had to work at that circle.
Play the system.
So I started to make contacts, and then the band were in and out of the US, so I would sometimes go and see them play shows. And watching those shows, like I saw on that tour, they went from playing mid-sized theaters, like 1,500 people. By the end of the tour, they were playing Brendan Byrne Arena in New Jersey, which is 21,000 people. And you could see in that same period from like December into June of the following year, 85, they were on the cover of Time magazine and Rolling Stone.
That's right.
First rock band to ever have that. Yeah. So it was like, all of a sudden you thought, oh yeah, like they're suddenly, now people ask me, oh, well, they must have been big when you first came here. But when I first moved to the States, most people really didn't know who you two were, in that way. In that next 18 months, they blew up on the Unforgettable Fire record. And then Joshua Tree was 2 years later.
That's the period I remember.
Yeah. So I ended up being there for a little bit. And then I came back. Dan called me. Dan Lanois had a studio, which is a little town called Hamilton outside Toronto. And he said that he was going to work with Peter Gabriel on the Birdie soundtrack. Who's the director?
Alan Parker.
Alan Parker. And
God rest him.
And rest his soul. And then Dan was basically repurposing tracks that basically he had never released, and so that became the soundtrack. But during that process, Peter asked Dan would he be the producer of the next record, which turned out to be so. And
Which is radical, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a radical departure for Peter, like music.
For music in general, I thought.
Yeah.
For Peter, definitely on his own.
Yeah.
But that sound, that crisp, clear, there's
Yeah, it's
something
very
very
yeah.
distinct about it. So
Dan asked me would I originally come over. I had a call with him. Would I come over to England to work on the record? And they basically said, you're coming over to mix or, help finish recording and mix. And they reckoned like 4 to 6 weeks. And, in that time frame, 3 months from beginning to, top to bottom for a record, that was about the norm. So I got to Heathrow. Peter's assistant, his name is David, picked me up at the airport, a lovely guy. We were long friends now. He's married to a friend of mine in New York. And we were driving from Heathrow down to Bath, where Peter had a studio, and just chit-chatting. And he goes, so how long did they tell you you're going to be here for? And he had worked for them for 5 years. And he knew. And he said, I said, well, 4 to 6 weeks. He goes, okay. And he looked off in the distance, and about a minute later, he goes, I think you're going to be here till next March. And that was like the beginning of June. And I left March 17th.
What?
Yeah. And so he knew. So that record, that was an incredible experience because obviously I reestablished my connection with Dan. I got to meet Peter. I was a big Genesis fan.
Yeah.
Got to work on this record, and we all knew it was a good record. But I'd worked on other good records that I thought could be successful up to that point. And they didn't capture the public's imagination, at least not in that initial release. Yeah. But that record, you felt like, because we would have people come by and we'd play them certain songs. And you could always just gauge from their reaction, like, well, that song is working on so many different levels. And so when Sledgehammer came out with that video, it was kind of phenomenal. And Peter was very gracious. He had pulled me aside at the end of the record. We'd finished the record in February. It got mastered. We mastered up at London at the Townhouse with Ian Cooper. And he said, you're going to need a manager. He said, yeah. He said, he could see. He knew the record would be successful. Well, he was confident the record was going to be successful. It was a great piece of advice because two of my friends who worked with you two in New York, Ellen Darst and Karen Kaplan. They were starting their own management company under the umbrella of Principal. Yeah. They called it Mambo Management. Yeah. And so T-Bone Burnett was their first client and I was their second client. Yeah. So immediately, that record came out. I went from Bath to Boston for about a week. I had a bunch of meetings there. I came back to Ireland and I worked on a record with Howard Jones and Arif Martin. And that's where I was like, okay, they said, well, you're going to come to the US. And
was that Howard's first one?
No, it was called One to One. Yeah. And so that was like where, okay, the label's going to help me get my papers and all that stuff, And
at this stage, were you pinching yourself?
It was surreal. Yeah, it was very surreal because to hear a record you worked on be on the radio every day, multiple times. Frankly, I'm in the studio working on another record. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I'm not really out there listening.
But your ego is chuffed.
Well, you're definitely, you're thinking, okay, that's good. My parents kind of as a little aside, when I was in Lombard, came in and visited one day. And like I said, Lombard was great in the beginning for me, but it wasn't the most deluxe looking place. It was a little on the shabby side, but it worked great. And my parents were like looking at me thinking,
is this real?
Is this what you want to do? And so after I joined Wimble, there was a point where Bill Whelan was doing a jingle for Guinness. And it was like a big ad campaign. Like they were sinking a lot of money into it. And I knew Bill very well at this moment. And I guess at some point I'd related that story to him. And he said, why don't you have them come in and like watch? So we had the RT Symphony Orchestra in the studio. And I don't know if you were ever in Wimble, but the way the console was situated, like the control room actually was slightly sunken below the recording space. Yeah. So from the engineer's position, you're looking right through the middle of the glass divider. But right in front of it is this beautiful couch. So my parents came in, and they sat and we had like sandwiches and tea and all the orchestra members were milling around and stuff like that. And I'm out doing my thing as I have to do and they're sitting watching. And then, the piece gets recorded multiple times. And at one point, Bill makes some corrections and then they get the take. And at one point I'm looking over at my dad and you can just see a tear go down. And he's looking at me and he's going, you get to do this every day? Yeah. And I said, yeah, but it's not like this every day, but I do get to do this every day. And he goes, I totally get why you like this. Yeah. And from that moment on, they were like, okay, we get like why you made this choice. And then when Peter's record came out, and obviously the U2 record was beginning to do well, but when Peter's record came out and, just the amount of exposure that had, they were super proud. And they were like, yeah, that's great. Like you did make the right decision, So,
you never had any doubts?
I didn't really have any doubts. No, I didn't. I really felt like that was my calling. As you can see, my ears stick out. You know, I have big ears. So
we all have big ears.
Yeah, but when I was younger, I got teased relentlessly about it.
Yeah.
And so...
not bullying, though, was it?
Well, it definitely bordered on bullying. Yeah. And at one point, my parents said, do you want to have them like surgically, pinned back?
My mother used to sellotape them.
Oh, yeah. I'm thinking like, that would have been a different career if I listened like this, But, I was blessed, that kind of became my superpower, and it was kind of the thing. Like,
Which having built resilience, Kevin, or is just stubbornness or focus?
Oh, I'm definitely stubborn. Yeah. No, you ask anybody who knows me. Like I'm stubborn, but I'm not. I don't think to the point of being obnoxious. Yeah. But I think
Peter Gabriel row over.
No, we never rat.
He said A, you say B.
No. Dad and I sometimes would go at it, but yet again, it was never anything adversarial. It was more like, hey, I want to do this. And, one of the things I had observed when I was in the US for that short period of time, I'd gotten to see Bob Kluman work. And I was a big fan of his work prior because I was a big Roxy Music fan. Yeah. And I listened to like Flesh and Blood and Avalon, and I'm thinking, why do those records sound so different? And why do all these records that come out? No, it's Power Station.
Power Station.
Power Station. And I was saying, why do all these records sound different? Yeah. And so when I watched what he did, I was thinking, okay, I could do that. And at one point, I tried to do exactly what he had done. And of course, you can't replicate how somebody else hears. Yeah. And the lesson from that was...
That's the secret, what they hear.
What they hear. Yeah. But the question is, you have to lean into what you hear.
Yeah.
And so, like, the thing that attracts you to music is it's a very specific thing. Like, you're either like rhythm, you like melody, maybe you like both, whatever it is that you are drawn to by music. Making that be your signature and leaning into that gives you your sound.
To pull that out.
Yeah. And so with Dan and Peter, they were incredibly gracious, and they were like, you're running the console. Do what you think is right. I mean, Dan wanted to produce, and he's a great engineer, and he did quite a bit of engineering on that record, but they also gave me free reign to try it. And Peter was like, I really love the way this record is sounding. So we just kept doing what we were doing. And it was a different kind of record from anything I'd made up to that moment in time. Because when I joined the team, it was basically, there were a lot of issues that needed to be resolved that were due to these technical issues that had first occurred when they first started tracking. And without getting into the weeds with it, but the whole idea of synchronizing tape machines, and you think these two pieces of music are going to stay in sync forever, was not the case. And so all these performances that had been recorded were out of sync in terms of timing and pitch. And so we had to devise a bunch of different ideas and execute on trying to capture something from a different reel and put it on the master reel and compile like the best performances of everybody. So it stretched me as an engineer. And I think for Dan too, as a producer, like how do you manage all of this? And we were living at the studio, so we were kind of in residence. And
it's intense.
And it's intense, yeah. It's a very intimate experience. Like you're living with people, especially for an artist, and with an artist, because they're revealing their most inner
you see
moments.
At the most vulnerable.
Yeah, at the most vulnerable at that moment in time.
Yeah.
And if the record has a theme, you see that in abundance.
Yeah. Springsteen says that all the time.
And it's very true.
It's true. It takes a lot out of you.
That's part of the reason why, I really value that. And I think there's a certain undiscussed compact that you have with the artist. Yeah. Like, what happens in the studio stays in the studio.
And do you realize you were Premier League people at the time? I mean, the names you trot out now are household.
Yeah, the household names.
At the time, it was just Dan, it was Steve. I mean, nobody knew them as such.
Yeah, and nobody knew me. We were all in our ascendancy, really. I mean, Peter obviously had a huge cult following, and obviously his career with Genesis preceded that.
So it was a key album for him.
Yeah, key album for him. Yeah,
it opened up a whole different audience for him.
Yeah, well,
in my opinion.
Yeah, no, and I think he would agree. And in fact, this year in May is the 40th anniversary of the record.
Incredible.
Yeah, and in fact, without that record, without the success of that record, he probably wouldn't have opened Real World Studios. He would have opened a version of it, but not the version that we have. Yeah. And then Real World Records, all the work he's done in that area of developing artists from like third world countries and Africa and,
Yusuf Ndur.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible the work he's done.
Where do you see music now? Are you optimistic, pessimistic?
No, I'm always optimistic. No, I think I'm optimistic. I also teach a couple of days a week at NYU and a couple of
the skills you've accumulated are differently valued now with technology does so many things that you've acquired learning.
Yeah. All the technology that the new current music makers use came from the old analog processes. And these are nicer shortcuts. Yeah. They're not as destructive as editing tape and all that kind of stuff. But the theory behind them is identical.
You still need to know You
still need to have a good grounding. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things now. Like I feel like I want to be able to impart that information to my students, there's a reason why all this stuff exists. If you understand the reason, then you make better decisions when you're making records.
And when you sit there in NYU, they'll think it's easy peasy.
when you're a student, you think, oh, I've got this.
Yeah, I got this.
You know, that moment where you're sitting at the back of the classroom or in a studio and you think, oh, I could do that.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you're called upon to do it. And then you think, wait, can I do this?
And the confidence.
And the confidence,
into the pressure.
Because yet again, for an artist, like that is the most important moment in their career is making that record.
And if you rattle them, we're all in trouble.
Yeah, and you have to be composed, even if your inner stomach is doing flip-flops, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we've all had those moments. But the best engineers stay cool. But afterwards, I'm humble enough to say, yeah, like I was nervous. That was a nerve-wracking moment.
Yeah.
But I also understood that I could draw upon the experience. And therefore, I know how to do this. Like I know how to set up a microphone. I know how to
And do you get frazzled or are you always constantly...
No, I feel like I have a pretty even kind of tempo, you know, in the studio. You know, because yet again...
At home, with your family...
I try and keep work out of home because...
Your personality is the same type of...
Yeah, no, I try... Yeah, this is who I am. I'm pretty much like, you know, I wear my heart...
So you may on the subway, you'd be still...
Oh, yeah.
KK. And,
yeah. Still be chatty, still be, you know, looking for the crank. Yeah. What I love about making records is, you know, you go in of a morning, 9 o'clock in the morning time, everybody has an idea about what they want to record.
Yeah.
And at 9 o'clock at night time, you created something. And it may never see the light of day, but it didn't exist before that. It was an idea. And so the journey from the idea to capturing it and all the little tangents that occur, because sometimes you go off this way, then take a right-hand turn, and all of a sudden you think, oh, no, that's a cul-de-sac. Oh, we need to retrack back. Well, at least you know you've tried that idea. So that's been settled. That doesn't come up for discussion again. Let's try something else. And sometimes that creativity, I love that. You know, like I said, to me, it's like problem solving all the time.
Yeah.
Why is band
your
not
brain
playing?
sees you kind of mathematical in a way. You're very...
I was terrible at maths.
Yeah, but no, you're very sequential the way you think.
Yeah, I do think
and
logically.
music is kind of mathematical.
It is mathematical, yeah. It is problem solving. It is like, well, you know, why does the sound not work? Why the band aren't playing well? Like, what's wrong with the arrangement? Is it the song? Is it the performance? Is it the sound? You know, you start to go down through the list of things. And then with your experience, you go, well, okay. I mean, when I teach in NYU, one of the things I often say, you know, one of the students a couple of years ago asked me, what do you need to get a great mix? And I thought, well, that was a really interesting question. Like, what do you require to get a great mix? And I thought, well, at the most fundamental level, you need a great song. And from there, you iterate out from that. Because you can get a great mix of a terrible song, but it's still a terrible song.
Yeah, you can't do much.
You can't do much with it, you know what I mean? And so while a lot of people can make music now, it doesn't mean that it's always good.
Knock, knock.
Ooh, who's there?
A Boost Mobile expert, here to deliver and set up your all-new iPhone 17 Pro, designed to be the most powerful iPhone ever.
You call that a knock-knock joke?
This isn't a joke. Boost Mobile really sends experts to deliver and set up your phone at home or work.
Okay, well, it's just that when people say knock-knock, there's usually a joke to go with it.
Like I said, this isn't a joke.
So the knock-knock was just you knocking?
Yeah, that's how doors work.
Get the new iPhone 17 Pro delivered and set up by an expert wherever you are. Delivery available for select devices purchased at boostmobile.com. Terms apply.
We all remember the choices that shaped the course of our lives. In business, world-renowned venture capital firm Sequoia Capital calls them crucible moments. Their podcast brings you inside the pivotal decisions that define some of today's most influential companies. Hosted by Sequoia's Roelof Botha, Crucible Moments Season 3 pulls back the curtain on the untold stories behind companies like Zipline, Palo Alto Networks, Supercell, and more. Hear about the make-or-break decisions, early stumbles, and leaps of faith that turn scrappy startups into market-defining forces. Once you're caught up on Season 3, check out some of the episodes from Seasons 1 and 2, with guests like Stephen Chen of YouTube, Tony Hsu of DoorDash, Steve Huffman of Reddit, Brian Chetsky of Airbnb, and more. Tune in to Sequoia's new season of Crucible Moments to discover how some of the most transformational companies of the modern era were built. Crucible Moments is available everywhere you get your podcasts and at cruciblemoments.com. Go listen to Crucible Moments today.
And I think, you know, music has that wonderful ability to reach out and touch people, regardless of the language it's sung in.
Right.
And it has that commonality that goes around the world, you know what I mean? And that's just something that's really special about that.
Magic, yeah.
Yeah, it's magic. It is magical. And so when you're part of something like that and you realize, oh, you worked on something that touched somebody's life, that's very humbling. You know what I mean? It is kind of humbling. And you think, oh, I want to have that experience again. It's not the fame and the fortune, because I'm the person in the booth doing my thing.
Can you deal with the fame and fortune, can you?
Yeah, fame and fortune. Maybe some fame, fortune, man. You know, I'm healthy. I'm alive.
That's the main
you know,
thing.
yeah, that's the main thing. I mean,
when you're sitting there in the summer evenings on the deck having a can of Coke or something like that, can you believe, looking back at the story, where you've come to be
Yeah, it's
when
surreal.
you're that 12-year-old.
Yeah, no, it's surreal. I mean, yeah, it is surreal. I feel like
when you say Dave Bowie, you say, my God, you throw that out as if it was.
Well, like I said, the very first record I ever bought was Ziggy Stardust. And then actually when I was working on Peter's record in 85.
He came into the studio.
No, U2 were playing Live Aid. So I went, Paul McGuinness, who was the manager of U2 at the time, asked me would I come down. He asked Dan and I to come down to help sit in the broadcast truck. I ended up doing it. And it was total shambles that day, but it was fun, you know. But when the band finished their performance, I walked off stage and I walked around. We were about 1,000 feet from the stage. Yeah. So we're kind of in the bowels of the building. Yeah. And we walked around, and when I walked around towards the band, I could see Edge, and he was talking to Bowie, and Bowie was dressed in the white suit. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God. So then when I got to meet him through Tony Visconti, it was probably one of the few times I was a little bit starstruck. I was like, oh my God, like that's David Bowie. Like it is the full circle.
We board up in the Glass Spider tour in Luton on that flight.
Yeah.
And I saw him up close. That's the first time I realised his eyes were totally different colours.
Yeah, yeah.
That freaked me out.
Yeah, yeah.
And Peter Frampton was playing the back band.
Oh, really, yeah.
And he was like 1977.
Frampton Goes Alive, yeah.
And he was a little fella standing there. Yeah. I didn't realise how they knew each other till later, the teachers. But
he was lovely to work with. And, you know, I mean, it's, unfortunately, we just crossed over the 10th anniversary of his passing. So, you know. It's hard to, like, when I look back and I think I've been incredibly fortunate. Yes,
it's surreal to hear you talk.
Yeah,
in a way.
Yeah, well, I think that at the same time, like, okay, I obviously clearly had a skill set because, you can prepare to get these opportunities, but if the opportunities present them, you still have to produce the results. So I feel like, okay,
do you think America helped you deal with that in a way? Because going back to the 80s and Ireland, the knocking thing we would have experienced. To say something like that, you say, Jesus, Kevin, who do you think you are? Yeah. In the States, it lends itself for you to believe in what you do if you think you're good enough.
Well, it is a place where you feel like if you work hard, you can get at that time. I still think that's true in Ireland. Obviously, look at just walking around the country.
It's a different country.
Yeah, it's a very different country, and thankfully, it's a fantastic now. I come back here and I think, I'm really proud of what's happened to the country. You know, and not that I've had anything to do with that, but I like the fact that it's really kind of made leaps and bounds over the last 40 years.
Are we too maudling as a people? About
no, I don't think so. No, I mean, death is part of life, and that's when you experience death, whether it's through friends or family members, you realize it is part of that circle and you have to embrace it. And if nothing, it should give you the perspective of like, you only live in the now. You know, people always talk, I'm going to do this tomorrow. Tomorrow doesn't exist. It's a figment of our imagination. So you're only living in this moment. So you have to make the most of this moment. So if it's whatever it is you do, making music, making art, teaching, being a mechanic, whatever it is you do, being a painter, like just love it for what, Like
and being Irish is a help or a hindrance?
Yeah, I think being Irish is a help because I think being raised and knowing that the country was like, it was a humble country definitely helped me, I think, be humble, and then I don't feel like I get out of place. I don't get above my station, as they say. I feel like very fortunate, but at the same time, I also feel like I worked at it to become good. You know what I mean? I had a skill set. I realized what that skill set was and I worked at it. And part of that is also being able to communicate with people and be in the room with people and make them feel at ease. I mean,
that's something we do have.
Yeah, we do have that. Irish people have that very easily. Like we're easy to talk to. We can talk about anything.
Small talk.
We're very good at that. Yeah. So, people feel very easy in our presence. And that's helpful when you're in the studio because yet again, if you think about what the role of the producer is and even to a degree the engineer, it's just to kind of create an environment in which the artist can succeed. Yeah. And that's broad enough of a kind of a definition, can mean anything. And the studio these days can be anywhere. It's not like what it was in Windmill and Lombard days, like a preset.
Or go down to Peter's old farmhouse.
Yeah. Now you can go into your kitchen and make it, and if you know what you're doing, you can make a good sounding record.
And if I asked you what songs permeate your life story, when you go to bad days, what do you do?
What do I go to?
Or what songs trigger happy memories? We all have songs that put your place in time.
Oh, sure. I mean, like certainly as a teenager, Aladdin Sane, anything from Ziggy Stardust, 10cc, I'm Not in Love, Stairway to Heaven.
I was watching recently how they produced the sound.
Brilliant.
It's like, God, the energy it took to get that. That funny?
Yeah, the choir.
Yeah.
Well, it's also similar to what Queen did. I saw the multi-track of Bohemian Rhapsody, and it's on 24 tracks. So, when you listen to that record, you think, oh my God, that the choir is huge. But literally the whole choir is bounced onto 2 tracks.
Yeah.
It's just 2 tracks. So at some point they made a decision that balance is going to work in perpetuity, and they committed it to it.
No turning back.
No turning back. Genius,
Yeah.
And it was like drums on. I think it was Freddie and Roger and John recorded the basic track. Just Freddie leading the time. But I think of all those records in the 70s, and then I started listening to when I really got into T-Rex and Mott the Hoople and ELO and then Roxy Music and then with the whole, and I liked a lot of disco too, because then again, being a teenager, you want to go dance. So anything that got you up on the floor was always a good thing.
But it's one thing the kids say at home, Dad, not that song again.
Yeah, I have my own son who's 25, Shane, and he got into music mostly by watching that show Glee. And my wife would always say to me, "Do you want to hear the original version of that song?" And he'd listen. At first he would listen, but he'd always say, "No, I like the new version better," because to his ears that was more modern.
Yeah.
And so, you ask me, am I optimistic? Yeah, because I do think that music creation comes from the soul. There has to be a reason why you create music. And I think the greatest musicians, just like the greatest writers, they get up every day and they have to do that. They just have to do it.
Yeah.
And they're not going to go do something else. They're going to write something. They're going to create something. They don't necessarily care about the financial gain at the other end, although we all understand that that's a compact that we have to have. But yeah, at the end of the day,
that's not the first priority.
That's not the first priority. Yeah. No, they've driven to create something. Yeah.
Well, the energies there. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And quotes that.
I have these old quotes because I wrote them down because I had to write them down. I got to do, but this is one of the ones I love. You got to do your own growing, no matter how tall your father was. And that's such a great one. And then the other one I love that I think is brilliant is, it's often that a man's mouth breaks his nose. And I thought, the older the fiddle, the sweeter the tune,
Yeah.
I love that. But I love a simple phrase, when you're walking around Ireland and you go into some place and they go, "Oh, so it's yourself." Yeah. Who else would it be? I think yeah.
Now, Gabriel Byrne was on the Late Date quite recently, and he told one of the stories of how we speak. How I'm going to go somewhere. I wouldn't start from here. I wouldn't go left, down there, no, then turn. We have a way of the Irish English that makes things sound very complicated.
Oh yeah, very complicated.
But it's all part of the
part of the crack.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which Americans find when I speak German, we make it very complicated to speak German. Would you mind if I do it? They just say yes, no, do it.
Yeah.
As we think it's rude.
Yeah. No. I mean, some of my. It's interesting because when I first went to New York, I didn't seek out the Irish community, because I was just in doing my thing. But of course, I met a lot of Irish people there and a lot of good friends there. But one of my dear friends there is Jerry Leonard, who's a guitarist with Bowie.
Yeah.
And Jerry worked with me on Paula Cole's first record. And then he ended up getting offered to come back there, and he created a life for himself there. And, he lives a couple of hours away from me, but we do a lot of projects together.
Yeah.
And, sometimes we'll go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And Paul Bushnell, who's the other person. Yeah, Paul is a great bass player who was living in California for many, many years. So,
Is that the beauty of New York for you? You can dip in a bit of Irish and still live. It's not this Cricklewood, Monk Maudling Irish that we grew up with. It's different now anyway.
Yeah, it's different.
Because everybody's investment. Irish people abroad are very different to the Irish people I worked away with in the 80s and 90s.
Well, I've always found that Irish people are incredibly ambitious.
Absolutely.
Incredibly ambitious.
Yeah.
If you're in,
that's why you go away.
That's why you go away because
you're forced to go away and you've no choice. You got to work harder than the guys beside you.
Yeah, and so that drive is there. And does that make you more resilient? I mean, my experience of resilience is that it's a common trait amongst the world's population. I mean, if you look at what's going on,
it's
not something specific to Irish people. I mean, Irish people have it in abundance. Yeah. But if you just even look at what's going on now in the world, look at Ukraine, look what's going on in the United States even, and all around the world, there are people showing incredible resilience. So it is there. And of course, and I think it's tied to the idea of that aspirational idea of I want to make the best version of myself, whatever that entails for you. So if you travel or if you move from country to country, you're ultimately trying to become the best version of yourself, wherever that takes you. I went to New York for a year. While I was there, I started getting offers of working with American artists. And I thought, okay, well, let's see. How do they make records here versus how do they make records in Dublin? What was the major difference? The major difference was not so much the musical styles were slightly different, the influences they drew upon, but some of the techniques, the basic engineering techniques were the same, but the technological kind of embrace of the older technology. They liked a lot of old tube gear, and they still had a lot of that available. Whereas, at Windmill, and we had the great Helios console at Lombard. When I went to Windmill, we had an MCI console, and then we switched to a SSL. And there were lots of SSLs in New York, but there were lots of Neve consoles.
Yeah.
And lots of customized consoles too.
Yeah.
And they had a great section of like C12s and, 251s and LA2As and all that stuff, you know. And I was like, oh, okay. Oh, that's why those records sound that way, because of this signal path. So and I just started getting an opportunity then to travel to LA and work on records out in Los Angeles, which felt like alien country.
Yeah. It's a different place.
It's a very, but I do enjoy going there. I don't go there very often to make records because everybody hires locally, as they should, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm happy to work in New York. I like living in New York because I feel like I can walk out on the street and just be anonymous. Nobody knows who I am. They don't care. And that's fine. You know what I mean? That's totally great. You walk into different neighborhoods and you see the neighborhoods change. Similar to what happens in Dublin, you see the regrowth, but it's all like so condensed.
Yeah.
But for me, like the food thing is really great. And now I know Dublin has great food. But yet again, that was one of the things that I just loved about New York in the beginning was, okay, all these different choices.
Yeah. Well, what's in the future now, Kevin?
Just continue making records as long as I still have that passion, to get up and go into the
And it
studio.
is a passion.
Oh, yeah. You can't do what we do without.
But you have bad hair days where you throw the...
Yeah. Doesn't everybody?
I don't know. I do.
Well, there are certain days I come back and I think, really, I hate what I did today. Like, I hate what my input was.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I go back and I listen to the next day and you go, actually, it's actually not bad. You were just kind of whatever. You got distracted or you decided that you just lost your perspective. So.
And your wife is American?
My wife, Barry, is American.
Yeah.
Yeah. My son, Shane, is American and Irish. They both have dual citizenship. So we travel here quite a bit.
Hey, this is Elise Hugh from TED Talks Daily, and I'd love to tell you about Whole Foods Market. You know what I love about January? It's that fresh start energy we all feel. And this year, I'm actually going to try and keep my goals realistic, which means I need places that make healthy choices easy and affordable. That's why I've been spending more time at my local Whole Foods Market. The thing is, Whole Foods Market makes it possible to stick with those New Year intentions without meal prepping for hours or breaking the bank. Shop all things wellness at Whole Foods Market.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Shifting a little money here, a little there, and hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Shane was here during the summer with me. Barry was here during the summer with me also. And then we were just in England right there for my niece's wedding on January 3rd. That was fun. It was a nice family trip. My son has moved to LA.
Is he?
So he's pursuing a TV kind of career, not as an actor, but like behind the scenes.
So he's taking it.
Yeah, he likes the production.
Yeah.
He likes the whole production thing. And
Is he influenced by you? Obviously, the answer is yes.
Yeah, I would hope so, yeah. But he doesn't, he hasn't shown no desire to be in music, although he did study classical voice in university. I mean, he went as a tenor and graduated as a tenor. And when he graduated in 2022, there really wasn't that many opportunities because of COVID.
Yeah.
So he started doing stuff in the TV world, production stuff. And then he ended up getting an internship at ABC, working on the morning show. And then he ended up working on that show Survivor out in Fiji. So he's been out there twice.
Yeah, media's changed so much.
Yeah, it's a very different landscape, you know. And so, I mean, he loves it and he has as much passion for that as I have for what I do. And my wife is also very passionate because she was a dancer.
Yeah.
And so she, so we were kept saying to him, like, you really want to pursue a career in the arts?
You're all showbiz.
Yeah, we're not, we're so not showbiz, we're not showbiz at all. I like what I do because I'm behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I like facilitating that thing of like sitting down with an artist and going, tell me what you want your record to sound like. And especially in the beginning when you're working with an artist for the very first time, like they're making their first album, their debut album. The idea that you get to shape that sonically, that to me is like a really special moment because you can never undo that, right? It's never going to occur again. The second record is like almost a reaction to the first, and the third is a reaction to the second and the first. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Take me back to the commitments.
Oh, yeah.
Because that to me, I was in Boston. We went to see it one Saturday in Boston. Couldn't believe the language, the way people lived, the story. The whole thing was incredible.
It was
as
incredible.
an Irish person.
Yeah, I totally agree, yeah.
What was the magic there? Did Alan know what he was doing?
Yes, he totally knew what he was doing because before I got involved, they were doing all the auditions here in Dublin. They were apparently set up in the Customs House and they were bringing people in. Paul Bushnell, who's the co-producer on the record with me, I knew his mom first in the studio in Lombard. She was a session singer, Anne, and I knew of Paul, but I'd never met him. When I left, he was still doing the band scene here. Ironically enough, I'd read the book flying back from Dublin to New York. And I got back to New York, and John Hughes, who was one of the brothers in Minor Detail, whom I knew through Bill, called me up and said, would you be interested in working on this film? And I obviously knew who Alan Parker was, and I knew the book. And I was like, yeah. And they were looking for somebody who could come work in Ireland and also could work in the States. So I ended up coming in, and they had just found Andrew Strong. And so we recorded all the music first. So all the music was recorded prior to a single frame of the picture being shot. And then, so what actually happened was we recorded all the music at Windmill down in Ringsend Road. Alan would come in every day, and he gave Paul and I enough license to do what we thought was the right thing. And Paul and I, our discussion with one another was like, you can't outdo like these classic songs. You know what I mean? So we have to take ownership and make it feel like this is intentional and put a little Dublin spin on it. So we just decided, we started going down this particular road, and it seemed to work. And Alan, and it needed to be lively. It needed to have like vitality to it. And so it was interesting, like just trying to figure out. And in the book, it doesn't say, and even in the film, it doesn't say, you don't have a sense of like what the timeline is. It doesn't say, you don't think it's 2 years. Is it 5 months? Is it a month? You know, you don't really know what it is. So that was kind of fun to do. And like even in the beginning when they're rehearsing, you know, and all the actors are musicians, right? So they can all play.
Well, Altman is still out there.
Yeah, he's still out there. So one of the things that we had them do was, okay, you play bass, you can play guitar. Oh, you swap instruments. So that thing, so they kind of have a familiarity, but they obviously not quite as facile on that. And so it made it look like, they're learning, but they still have some musicality to it. But yeah, we recorded, and then I left to go back. I went back to the States. I was working on a record with Elvis Costello and
Declan McManus.
Declan, yeah, lovely man.
Yeah.
And then they shot the film. Tim Martin took over, and he was on the on-set engineer. And then they did playback of all the music, but recorded all the vocals live. What you see on film is live performances of all the singing. So that gives it the authentic feel. But the music had to be captured because you can't go to a soundstage. It's not the ideal environment. So, and they needed to have certainty, like what the music is going to sound like. And then like almost 6 months later, when I was in LA, I'd finished that record with Elvis. Alan's production company was in LA. The editor was in LA. Everybody associated with the post-production was in Los Angeles. They brought Paul over from Dublin. And then they basically gave us the edit. And then we had to go onto all the multitracks and find that vocal take to match that frame. So that was like detective work for a period of time. And then we mixed it. And we did all this stuff. And Alan had one rule. You couldn't have a musical instrument that you didn't see on the screen.
Okay.
So it had to be like a raw band kind of thing, which is what that thing was. My attitude was like, okay, that works for the film because you got the film. I said, but does it work equally as well for a record? It's different. So we had this, or it wasn't a disagreement. We had this one moment where he said, well, go mix it, you know, to the picture. But I was mixing in a regular studio. So I was literally 6 feet from the speakers. And I mixed it like I was mixing a record. And, you know, I put a certain amount of reverb and effects on it. And then I took it down to the soundstage, a place called Todd A.O. And the mixing console is 200 feet from the scrim. And as soon as they hit play, I was like, I had my head in my hands. I was just embarrassed. And I was like, what is wrong? He goes, I said, this sounds terrible. And he goes, well, what do you mean? I said, it's completely wrong. Like it sounds like it's not here. It sounds like it's in this artificial space. And he said, well, what would it take for it to sound correct? I said, well, I need to at least mix one song in this space. So he graciously talked to the owner of the soundstage company, and we ended up mixing the whole record on the soundstage for the film. And so we did that there. And so instead of working from like 11 in the morning to like 2 in the morning, we were working from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. We were like bankers all the night. And we had a whole little routine. There was a lunch break because it was a union house. And at 5 o'clock, you finished, you just stopped and you picked back up the next day. And then when it came to mixing the record, like for the release, we used all the same multitracks. It was all pretty much the same performance, but I added some extra stuff. We got Mitchell Froome to come in and play some very subtle keyboards, and we had a percussion player come in, and then we had this guy, Dean Parks, come in and play additional guitar. And just for the record, so what you hear on the soundtrack is what you hear in the movie theater, but with some subtle kind of bolstering.
It's out of its time.
Yeah, it's really...
And that, going back to what we were saying earlier, being Irish in Boston, 91 or where it was, I clearly remember, and then we talked about the black North side.
Yeah.
Those in-jokes, but it suddenly put Irish people in a map in a humorous way.
Yeah.
They were gas people.
Right. And the fact that I'm from the north side, it was like, it was perfect. And Paul's from the south side, so we used to totally tease each other.
And I grew up on the north side. We lived there. But the whole humor and Wilson Pickett never showed up.
Wilson Pickett never showed up. Maybe he will at some point. Yeah.
And last thing, will the likes of a band like U2 ever happen again with the Fontaines or something else? No.
I would like to think so.
See, music distribution is so different.
It's so different, yeah. I mean, I think that the main issue now is that artists don't get a chance to grow as organically as they did. Like when you two were signed to Ireland, first 3 records didn't really sell. They've sold well as catalog, but in their initial releases, they sold reasonably well. But Ireland, I mean, I just read Chris Blackwell's book, his autobiography, and he said like those records, they weren't profitable at the year of the release.
Yeah.
Obviously, subsequently they did, but they allowed them to grow.
Yeah. Well, Springsteen's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first 2, they didn't do anything, but that's a catalog. They grow into themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I just read the biography. The biography written about the making of. Is it Darkness on the Edge of Town?
Yeah.
With Jimmy Iovine. So it can happen, but whether they're given the space to grow and develop, that's a whole other thing. Yeah. And people's patience and people's attention span.
10 seconds. Yeah.
10 seconds. And the fact
don't listen to albums the same way either.
No, nobody listens to an album. But I make albums.
Yeah.
And so I'm still thinking about sequence. I'm doing a record with Kieran Goss and Annie Kinsler right now. And we were just talking on Sunday about the sequence of the record. And I generally, when I'm working on an album, I started doing this back in the 90s, I did a record with Elvis and Burt Bacharach, and we mixed the album in sequence. And since then, I've always done that. If I know what the sequence is, I'll mix the album in sequence. Yeah. Doesn't mean now I won't go back and revise it, which I will, because just the technology will allow you to do that. But I do mix it in sequence, so you kind of know if somebody were to listen from top to bottom, how to shape that listening arc.
Because there is
a thought behind it, yeah. And those, like with a 10-song record, there's like over 1 million permutations, right? And a lot of them would work, but it's in the ear of the beholder, right? So musically, there are certain keys that work very well together, certain keys that rub. So you still have to be at least mindful of that. So yeah.
Will you write a book?
I don't know. I have a friend of mine who's a publisher who really wants me to write a book.
I think,
and I feel like I said at the outset, a lot of the things that go on in the studio are privileged.
Well, I don't mean in that way.
Yeah.
It's not spill the beans.
Yeah, not spill the beans.
But just the way.
Maybe the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
From Stockton's waiting to here.
Yeah. Michael Hanley to David Bowie. Yeah.
That's tremendous.
Yeah. I have an idea for a name of a book, which I don't know if it would work. But at the same time, my friend Michael is always saying, please, please, please come and write the book, And I'm like, oh, maybe, But I'm busy. I try to keep busy every year. I try to work on projects. I did a wonderful project last year with David Byrne, and it's a project, 21 songs based on the life of Joan of Arc. It's really cool.
He's radical.
Oh, he's great.
He's very different.
Yeah, he's very different.
Charming.
Oh, he's fantastic. Yeah. He's fantastic. And just the way in which his mind works. And also, if you've ever read his book, How Music Works, it's such a fascinating book. Yeah, he talks about being an artist signed to a major label, artist signed to his own label, the difference in income, how royalties work. As a young musician now,
good learning
required reading, I would say. Yeah, just go to the last chapter, required reading,
We'll have to wait for your book, Kevin. Kevin Killen, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
Can I make my site softer?
Can I make my site firmer?
Can we sleep cooler?
Sleep Number does that. Cools up to 8 times faster and lets you choose your ideal comfort on either side. Your Sleep Number setting. JD Power ranks Sleep Number #1 in customer satisfaction with mattresses purchased in-store and online. And now, the more you buy, the more you save on beds, bases, and more. Limited time. For JD Power 2025 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Check it out at a Sleep Number store or sleepnumber.com today.
How do you turn a bold dream into a disruptive reality? Hear straight from the leaders across tech, healthcare, and life sciences who are shaking up the status quo right now. We're diving into their innovation, stories, and lessons learned. This is From Dreamers to Disruptors, a podcast by Medidata. Search From Dreamers to Disruptors wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe.